Hello, everyone, and especially my 7 subscribers. Thank you so much for joining me today on Tutoring with Patrick. Today's topic will be American history, so let's dive in. In the year 4000 BC, America was founded by this bitch. Face only a mother could love. But everybody knows who he is, George Washington. Shortly after founding the colony of Washington, named after himself, we began our northwest expansion efforts. A mere 900 years later, we started cultivating the land. In 2920 BC, it was determined that America needed to expand its borders in the name of God. A God that we didn't quite know because Catholicism wasn't founded yet at this time, but is coming soon. Incidentally, during this time, we also met our neighbors Melbourne. We decided we needed to expand our borders the same time we met our closest neighbors, who, as we all know, one day become part of our civilization. In 1780, this is the period where we entered the classical era, and as we all know, you can't beat the classics. Now, the classical era gave us so many great things like Stonehenge of Washington, or the Oracle of Washington. It was during this period we also founded Catholicism, so we determined the God that wanted us to expand our borders at this point. This also, unfortunately, was the period where we had the Melbourne misunderstanding. Now, this was a period of time where Melbourne, for some strange reason, thought that we were trespassing on their land. Now, from our standpoint, we had merely sent over a guide, and they didn't like it. They didn't like it. Now, in 320 BC, this brought on the medieval era. Now, the medieval era had its great points too. For instance, in 200 AD, we founded New York, right on the west side of the Rockies. We now had colonies on both sides of the Rocky Mountains. In 820 AD, we also completed the Chichen Itza. Now, we're gonna pause right here. I know you might be confused because in the Eastern world right now, we do have the colony of Chichen Itza. Well, this isn't that same Chichen Itza. It turns out that the architect that was building this great wonder, during an interview, was trying to say that he tried ordering everyone Chicago pizza, and it came out Chichen Itza, and everyone just kind of went with it, so now we have the Chichen Itza. In 900 AD, another golden age had dawned for us. It was during this period that we met Enrico of Venice. Now, we all know that the holy city of Confucianism and good old America have always somewhat butt heads. You know, until stuff that happens later, and well, we'll get to all that. In 1040 AD, we constructed the Angkor Wat, another great and illustrious wonder of our world. In 1060 AD, we noticed Melbourne start to get a little testy with us, and this began the 100-year war with Melbourne over the North American territories. In 1160 AD, we had conquered we'll call it an uprising in Melbourne, and it officially became part of the United States. This so far gave us a full chain of control in the North American territory. In 1280 AD, we entered the Renaissance, starting with meeting Augustus of Rome. Now, it was meeting Augustus of Rome that let us first understand that there were people and places beyond the ocean. And this intrigued us quite a bit, but we unfortunately wouldn't be able to search and discover that territory for quite some time still to come. Now, in 1450 AD, that's the next notable thing, we constructed the Great Wall of Washington. Now, in 1450, this was a really good idea because it was just trying to keep out invaders. You know, the Great Wall right now, it's more of an aesthetic thing because there are things like dynamite, planes, you know, ways that you can get around walls. Construction in 1450, wall was a totally great idea. If we were to, say, construct it now in 2019, 2020, it'd be kind of useless. 1540, this is when our curiosity got the better of us, and we started to understand how to traverse the sea. 60 years after learning that, we decided to go as far northwest as we could and founded Boston, right next to the Bering Strait. We were determined that we'd find a way across the ocean as soon as we possibly could. In 1620 AD, we constructed the Leaning Tower of Pisa. 1640 brought us the Globe Theatre. Two great wonders built so close together. It was also in the same year that the Globe Theatre was constructed that we traveled down to the southern world near Venice and colonized Philadelphia. Now this gave us a little bit of land close enough to Venice to keep an eye on them, but still having that mountain barrier. In 1665, we finally ended up crossing the ocean, and Catholicism began to make its way into the New World. Alright, in 1685, we met Ahmed of Morocco and discovered the city of Marrakech. This was yet another civilization across the ocean that we really were unsure about. We didn't know a whole lot about their territory, what their cities looked like, but our Catholic explorers were still venturing that way, and we'd know them soon enough. And we would just continue making our way westward through the Eastern world. This is a bit of how we learned that the world was round. Now in 1720 AD, we met Pakal of the Mayans, and learned of Palenik. 1745, we met Theodora of Byzantium. And it was also during that same year that the World Congress was founded. Now 10 years later, in 1755, we had decided we needed to get a little bit closer to our neighbor to the south, and instead of having that mountain barrier, we founded the city of Atlanta, right next to Venice. 1765 brought us the Industrial Era. Now, the Industrial Era didn't exactly start off on a great foot. Only 5 years after the era began, we unfortunately had the civilization war between the North and the South. Having already been and colonized so much of the North American world, we felt that with all the disease that was coming from Venice, it was alright to colonize the southern world as well. 5 years into this war, we founded the city of Chicago, way further up north. We decided that we wanted to put most of our efforts into still colonizing the area that was not a threat to us, but confirming and making sure no one else could have a leg in that territory. Now in 1790, we had taken Venice, giving the North a huge leg up in the war. And in 1845, we officially saw the end of the war between the North and the South, with the North claiming victory and having colonized the entirety of the South. In 1850, a formal proclamation was made. 1876 brought us into the modern era, where we as America decided that we wanted to embrace the ideals of freedom. Now, in 1960, years after the war between the North and the South had ended, we continued to venture south and noticed that Morocco had founded the city of Casablanca right at the southern tip of the Western world. We would need to keep an eye on this. I mean, we just got finished fighting an entire war with a civilization almost entirely wiping them out, but Morocco decided that, they could step in and just steal a small part of land. Whatever. Now, in 1920 AD, Theodora had asked us to take part in the Byzantine Mayan War. And being that we were such good friends with Byzantium at this time, we agreed. It was also around this time that we began to truly venture out into the sea. At this point, we had, of course, explored land. We'd crossed the sea, but we had crossed the sea in such a way that we hadn't truly seen everything that the ocean had to offer. Now, in 1950, this was the event known as the Byzantine Blowoff. Yes, unfortunately, due to not agreeing with their proposal at the World Congress and having chosen a freedom ideology, whereas they had more of an autocracy, they decided that our friendship needed a bit of a break. Now, this break in our friendship told us that there was no reason that we needed to continue this war with the Mayans. So we went to them and offered them a peace treaty. Because of this peace treaty, they offered us the city of Tikal. We graciously accepted. Now, this territory brought us closer to the Mayans, brought us closer to Morocco, and we were even close enough to Byzantium in case anything had changed with our relationship again. 1982 AD brought us Big Ben, And it also brought us into another war. The Mayans, who we had just finished a war with, had decided to ask us to take part in the Mayan-Venice War, which we graciously agreed to, as we had already had issues with Venice in the past. We also, in this same year, constructed the colony of San Francisco just north of our Roman Empire friends. 1968, we constructed Broadway in the beautiful city of Boston. It was also at this time that we decided that the entirety of the Western world belonged to America. So we unfortunately needed to take control. But in 1980, we had established what territory was truly ours. And through establishing that dominance, they had quickly decided that war was not a good option and even offered us their island nation of Tangier. Now, Tangier, incidentally, was right next to Tikal. So we had a leg through the ocean into the land. In 1981, after years of fighting, we had decided to go to Venice and call for another peace treaty. Venice decided that in exchange for peace, they would give us their city of Ormus, which once again was right close to Tikal. Now, unfortunately, having pulled out of the war, the Mayans decided that we were no longer to be trusted, and our militant forces might have been a little close to their borders, but having them declare war on us made it so that way that was not a bad thing. In 1982, amidst all of the hustle and bustle of war, we constructed the Eiffel Tower in the city of Chicago. It was also during that same year that we took over Chichen Itza. Now, this one actually is the colony of Chichen Itza this time. It is not the accidental wonder of the same name. It was also during this period that we noticed a little bit of discontent between some of the nations. We noticed that Byzantium was having a bit of civil resistance. We noticed that Venice was the same. The Mayans and Americans were content. We were two major powerhouses, which made the war all the more threatening. But in 1988, the war came to a rest, with the Mayans giving us Marrakech as a peace offering. Now, having given us Marrakech created an interesting phenomenon. We now had the entirety of the Western world, and we had completed the American belt in the Eastern world. So America was quickly on the rise, spreading across everywhere. This brings us to current events. The next big event that took place was in 2006 when America had won the international games. The Mayans came fairly close. They earned a few bronze and silver medals, but we took home the gold. It was a true masterpiece for America. In 2010 AD, we constructed the Cristo Redentor. Like how I do an accent there? Covers up the fact that I don't really know how to say that. And looking forward into 2020, well, we expect our borders to continue growing. Washington is thriving and bustling. We're still very content. We are the happiest out of all the nations. We are the most cultured. Unfortunately, the Mayans are still a little bit more influential as far as the cultural background goes, but we're heavily on the rise. Now, with all of this knowledge that I've just given you, go do one heck of a college paper. Go make the best project that you possibly can. Impress all of your friends with all of them brain smarts, and I will see you guys next time. Bye! Please note none of this information was accurate. It's only intended for entertainment purposes. Please contact a teacher, historian, or your local retirement home for more factual information on American history.